All right. I mean, if you guys say stuff like that, I just won't put it up. All right. So, overall process, effect on chromosome number, and genetic makeup of the daughter cells. Those are the things we need to talk about. As far as the overall process, a basic thing we want to talk about there is that there's 2 stages to meiosis. Mitosis, there's just kind of one, I guess I should say there's 2 parts split up into 4 stages each. In mitosis, there's just one part that's 4 stages long. Okay? But the other thing we want to differentiate there is, remember that mitosis is a cycle, right?
Yeah.
You have one cell that can go through mitosis to produce 2 new cells. Each of those can go through mitosis, so they can kind of keep going. Meiosis, not a cycle. Meiosis is a singular process. Stem cells can create gametes through the process of meiosis, but once those gametes are formed, they can't go through meiosis again. Okay? Now, what about chromosome number? How does mitosis affect chromosome number?
They only make 2.
They make 2 cells, but what about the number of chromosomes?
They're diploid. They have the same amount of chromosomes.
The same amount of chromosomes. Remember, mitosis does not change the number of chromosomes.
Oh.
Okay? If you have a diploid cell, you create a diploid cell through mitosis. If you have a haploid cell, you create a haploid cell. It's a clone. All it does is create 2 copies of the exact same thing. But meiosis, remember, is going to cut the number of chromosomes in half. Meiosis is always a diploid cell going to a haploid cell. In every case. Okay? The other one we want to differentiate between is, the other thing is that in mitosis, you get 2 genetically identical cells. They're clones, right? Completely the same as far as the genes go. In meiosis, we get 4 cells, and each of those cells is going to be genetically different due to independent assortment and crossing over. Okay, any questions there thus far? So, a typical question you can see on the test would be something like, how do the cells produced by mitosis compare to the cells produced by meiosis? So there you would want to say that you get 4 cells versus 2 cells. They're haploid versus, well, I should say the chromosome numbers are half versus the chromosome numbers are the same. Genetics are different versus the genetics are the same of mitosis cells.
Yeah.
All right, number 4 says explain independent assortment, crossing over, and random fertilization. Can we skip this one?
No, I need to know that.
Oh, we can skip it, though. It's going to be on the test. Okay, independent assortment. I tried to hit this a couple different ways, but guys, all it is the fact that in that first part of meiosis, when the chromosomes line up and they're going to move to other ends of the cell, there's no thing that monitors which chromosome is going to go what way. It's completely random how they get laid down. So when you're comparing one chromosome set to another chromosome set to another chromosome set, in this cell that's going through meiosis, those are going to be lined up in a certain way. In another cell that's going through meiosis, just because of the random way they get laid out, it's going to be completely different. The more of those chromosomes you have, the more different varieties there could be. That's independent assortment. Okay? Just means that how the chromosomes get separated compared to another set of chromosomes is independent. It does not have anything to do with each other. That's the independent part.
So how they're laid out has nothing to do.
How one chromosome lines up to get separated has nothing to do with how another chromosome gets lined up to get separated.
So what would be the question?
What's that?
So what was the question?
A question would be something like, how does independent assortment lead to variation in sex?
What was the answer?
It would be like they are picked randomly.
The chromosomes get separated randomly compared to each other.
No. Are you kidding?
Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, I will see if I can find some type of video or computer simulation or something that will show independent assortment, and I'll send it out on the a link out on the remind thing for you guys to check out.
I love that. How do we do that remind thing again?
How do you do the remind thing?
Yeah, I got a new number and we'll probably know.
Oh, at the end of class, let's talk about this. Okay. You got a new phone. You got a new number. Whole new number. All right. Crossing over. So remember, that happens in prophase 1. That's just where two homologous chromosomes that are lined up can just kind of swap their DNA. One part breaks off, another part breaks off, and they switch. It's like mix and match.
What's random fertilization?
We're going to get to that, Jason. Just a minute. So crossing over would kind of be like if I take off Jason's arm and I put it on Michael, and I take off Michael's arm and I put it on Jason. They swap. We swap. Although the way it would work, we would have to swap these two arms. So now Jason would have one arm forward and one arm backwards. So would Michael on opposite sides.
Why would we have to do that?
I said so. No, because they swap information on the sides that are right next to each other, where a crossing over is able to occur. Okay.
We wouldn't have to go back.
Oh.
It should be like that, not back.
Oh my god.
So the elbow's pointing the other way. Anyway. So, random fertilization is just the fact that when two organisms mate and the sperm and the ova get together, there's, who knows which sperm cell is actually going to find the ova to fertilize it. And each of those sperm cells are different. What? Then you don't get a new organism. No zygote, no fertilization. Okay, but the whole point is that there's lots of different ova that can come down and be ready to be fertilized. And there's no telling what genes are going to be there because of all the other things. And there's no telling what genes are going to be in the sperm cell that actually does the fertilization. So because of that, when two organisms have offspring together, there's lots of different ways that those genes can get put together, and there's lots of different variation that can be within just those offspring, even though there's only two organisms that are actually there. You're making a lot of noise. Okay. Number 5 says explain the importance of genetic variation, why sexual reproduction is important to a population.
Diversity.
Why is diversity important?
So we don't die.
Disease, some people won't survive.
Right, because if there's a disease, some of the organisms will, there's a much more likely chance anyway that some of the organisms are going to have genes that are going to let them survive. Okay, we talked about the bananas and how they're all basically clones of each other. There's no variation there, and so a disease could easily come in, and if it kills one plant, it'll kill all of them. If it gets to them. I mean, there's ways to try to keep the disease from getting to them. But if they had genetic diversity, if a disease came through, it might kill a lot of the banana plants, but there might be some that are actually resistant and get the disease and don't die. Like the what?
Just like the sword.
Swine flu.
Yeah, or any of those diseases. That's why we tend to not see 100% human mortality in any kind of disease, even like Ebola, which has a very high kill rate, because we have diversity. There's differences in genes.
So it just makes it harder for the virus to attack you, or?
It makes it harder for the virus to kill off every organism in a population.
But we don't think that.
So
Maybe you wouldn't. That's the point. Maybe you have because of variation, maybe you have the genes that make it able for you to survive and all the rest of us die. But the point is, if we were, I mean, we know Jason's going to die. So if we were all clones of Jason, then
We'd all die.
yeah, because there's no genetic diversity.
That's how I he is.
Just 100 Jasons for everyone.
Nah, I was just kidding.
That'd be scary.
I mean, he just kind of looks sickly.
Yeah. You didn't get sucked into a black hole.
That's true. That's gonna be hard on a person. All right. Number 6. Explain the difference between oogenesis and spermatogenesis. Remember, oogenesis is the production of ova in a female ovary. Spermatogenesis is the production of sperm. But remember, we did talk about a couple differences, at least in humans, and we see those differences occur in a lot of different organisms, not all. So what are some of the differences we talked about between the two?
The sperm are mobile.
Okay, well, that's true. That is a difference in the type of cells. The sperm are mobile. But we're talking more about the production.
Oh, there's, it makes 4 gametes, and there's like 3 of them that don't do anything.
There's only one
Which
ovum and
The ova, that's the ova one.
So remember, the oogenesis, it goes through meiosis to separate the chromosomes, so the chromosomes get separated the same, no matter what. But in oogenesis, all of the rest of the stuff, the mitochondria, the cytoplasm, all that stuff, is basically saved for one of the ova. And the other 3 things just develop what we call polar bodies, and they don't have the chance to ever become a fertilized egg, fertilized ova, because they don't have any of the nutrients and stuff. So there we talked about how in females, because they keep the gametes inside them, and they are able to protect them, they're able to put kind of all their eggs in one basket and go, here's the thing, and we're going to put all the stuff there so that there's enough nutrients for that zygote to grow. Okay? So you get 3 polar bodies and 1 actually gamete, true gamete in oogenesis. So that's a big difference.
gross, like it gets frozen on time, like when they're born or something.
Okay. So in females, the oogenesis starts before they're actually born, and it all gets kind of stuck in, I believe it's anaphase 1. But I could be wrong about that. That's not the important part. The important part is they kind of get stuck in meiosis. Meiosis is kind of the eggs go into suspended animation, and they're sitting there ready to finish meiosis and produce that actual mature gamete once puberty and menstrual cycle and all that kind of stuff kicks in. Okay? Whereas in males, it's just an ongoing thing.
So where like females can't have babies after they're like moited or something.
Yeah.
Part of it is has to go along with that, and how the ovaries kind of shut down once you enter menopause. But that's not like the specific reason.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah, it's definitely past 12.
yeah, like it's
Wait, so can guys produce sperm forever? Or
The quality tends to go down as they get older, but yes, in theory, pretty much until the end of their life, they are able
That's
to
awesome.
produce vitamins.
not that much on. I think it's just
Okay. All right, number 7 says compare and contrast sexual and asexual reproduction and the genetic makeup of the offspring of each. So remember, in sexual selection, you have to have gamete production and fertilization. In asexual production, you basically the organism makes a clone of itself. Okay. The other thing to remember, the difference here is, kind of the important difference, is here we have, a word that has left my head. No, not spaghettify.
Spaghettify. Spaghetti.
All right, we use mixing. Here we have a mixing of genes in sexual reproduction between the two parents. And of course, in asexual reproduction, we just have one organism's genes. Okay? So we talked about how organisms produced by asexual selection are basically clones of the original. So we'll talk about what we think of as cloning later, but this is natural cloning, basically.
Bless you.
And the offspring from sexual reproduction are going to be half genes from one parent, half genes from the other. Okay. Number 8, explain each of the different types of life cycles, haploid, diploid, alternation of generations, to be able to give examples of organisms for each. So let's hit the organisms first. What type of organisms will we see haploid? Some protists and fungi. Diploid?
Humans, animals.
Animals and some protists. Alternation of generations?
Plants.
Some protists and plants. Okay? Now, as far as the differences between those, what I would like you to focus on is how are gametes produced, as far as the process that produces the gametes.
If they're going to haploid to diploid, they'd be
Can't go haploid to diploid. Well, sorry, I shouldn't say that. Haploid to diploid would actually be fertilization. Two haploid cells coming together to create a diploid zygote. That's going to create, be the case in every single one of those life cycles. Okay, but let's say you had an organism that was going from diploid to haploid to produce gametes. Which of the processes would it have to use? Meiosis. Which of those life cycles uses meiosis to produce gametes?
haploid.
Diploid.
Diploid.
Diploid only. Okay. So, what process do haploid and alternation of generation life cycles use to produce gametes?
Alternation generation uses
They switch.
Switching?
They use those.
Now I'm saying, what process do they use to produce their
Life cycle.
gametes?
Mitosis.
Mitosis. Both of them. Because in both cases we have a multicellular thing that is haploid. It's going to produce haploid gametes. It doesn't need to separate any chromosomes, are already separated. Okay? So, haploid and alternation of generations use mitosis to produce gametes. We're the weird ones, we use meiosis.
Yeah.
Okay? Number 9, explain parthenogenesis and when it's important. So, parthenogenesis, remember, means virgin birth. I guess I don't know for sure, but I'm fairly certain that you only really see this in females. Female organisms.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
they
the
have
old
ovaries.
word.
What's it called whenever males turn into females?
Transex.
Like what those needles say.
Transgender.
Oh, yeah, that, sorry, that's true. That does happen in that case. There's some, yeah. We'll get to that later, actually.
Okay.
Sorry. When would parthenogenesis be important?
When there's a disease.
No,
that
was
was
females.
When there's like an overabundance of one sex, and there's like not the other one.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a way to say it. The way I would say it is when you can't find a mate.
I was looking at those whiptail lizards and it said they have female intercourse, female and female intercourse. They like rub up against each other, stimulate their reproduction.
Well, I mean, yeah. In a lot of organisms, it takes some sort of interaction to stimulate ovulation.
Oh my god, I can't get up my head.
Okay? And then finally, number 10 says, explain the difference between identical and fraternal twins and how each are formed. And I didn't put it up there, but you should also know about half-identical twins.
Identical are there.
So remember, how are identical twins formed?
Okay, like the sperm goes like,
The
and
splitting
then
of
they
the
split.
ova.
Right, mitosis happens after the zygote is formed. So you have a fertilized zygote that goes through mitosis, it splits. For whatever reason, instead of those going, because that happens, it's going to happen no matter what, right? They're going to split. But instead of both of those cells growing into the same organism, they grow into two identical organisms. What happens for fraternal twins?
They split right away.
No,
There's two ovas.
there's two ova that are dropped. Each of them gets fertilized independently. No different than brother and sister just born at the same time. Or, I should say brother and sister. No different than any other siblings. Just born at the same time.
And half is when we eat them, right?
No.
Or absorb them.
No. Half identical is when a single ovum, splits and then gets fertilized. Right? And so it's the mother's genes. In any half identical twins, they will share their mother's genes. The father's genes will be different.
Okay. Alright.
And the proper word is absorb.
Oh, sorry.
We did talk about absorbing twins and stuff, but there won't be anything on it.
Like on drugs or something, but I told her that.
I told my mom about
It's life,
the
man.
ant with teeth and eyeball and
Yeah.
brain. And she's like, yeah, you know that story.
I'm looking for a parthenogenesis. Now can I throw my garbage away?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
What is part?
Are we just doing the board game?
When
Sure. Are we just doing the board game and astronomy?
Yes.
They can produce sexually and
Whole board game?
what did you write? See you on Monday.
See you later.
Don't forget, I don't want to. Shirley, no, you.
What's that?
ready to buy the
No.
Are you looking for food?
Huh?
Yeah. Is it a strawberry? Are you looking for food?
We haven't yet. Usually, when we have time, it's always cloudy out.
You stare at the sun today?
They have not. I don't have a filter for my telescope.
Yeah.
It's an open for me. We just like. Oh, I hate those now. Sure, sure. Tell us. I hate them. I hate them so much and I was a little bit dumb. Get the log.
Oh crap, I'm still recording.